Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
There's something you do. Maybe it's the extra glass of wine after dinner when the house gets too quiet. Maybe it's the scrolling. Just scrolling through other people's lives at midnight, not even really seeing what you're looking at. Maybe it's staying busy, relentlessly busy, volunteering for everything, saying yes to everyone, filling every hour so you never have to sit alone with the sound of your own thoughts. You know what I'm talking about, because you're doing it right now, aren't you? Not the scrolling, maybe, but the numbing, the beautiful, exhausting, quietly desperate act of not feeling what you're actually feeling. And here's the part no one says out loud. It's working. It's working just enough to get you through the day. Just enough that you can smile at the grocery store, answer your daughter's texts, make the coffee, feed the dog. Just enough that people who love you don't know how much weight you're actually carrying beneath all that competence and composure. But something brought you here today. Some small, stubborn part of you that hasn't given up yet. And I want to talk to that part of you, because she's the bravest one in the room. I've sat with women in their 60s who describe the same feeling using almost identical words. They say it feels like living behind glass, like watching their own life from a slight distance, present enough to function, but not fully in it, not fully there. And when I ask them when it started, most of them have to think for a moment. Because the truth is, it didn't start with one big thing. It started quietly. It started the way fog rolls in, slowly, imperceptibly, until one morning you realize you can't see the road anymore. For some women, the numbing started after a loss. A marriage that ended, or worse, a marriage that continued but felt like a kind of slow disappearance. A child who grew up and moved away and left behind a silence that no one warned you about. A parent who died and took with them a version of yourself you hadn't finished becoming. Or maybe it was smaller than that. A friendship that faded, a career that ended earlier than you planned, a body that started speaking a language of aches and limitations you didn't expect to be learning yet. For others, the numbing started after years of being the strong one, the caretaker, the woman who held everything together for everyone else, so consistently and so well that no one thought to ask if she was okay. No one thought to check on her. And after enough years of that, after enough years of your needs being the last ones on the list, if they were on the list at all, you stopped feeling them so loudly. You turned the volume down. Because what was the point of feeling what no one was going to tend to? That's not weakness. I need you to hear that. That is adaptation. That is a human being doing what human beings do. Finding a way to survive a pain that felt unsurvivable. The numbing wasn't a failure. It was a mercy you gave yourself when no one else was handing out mercy. But here's what mercy can become if you're not careful. It can become a sanctuary that turns into a cell. There's a difference between resting in a quiet place and hiding in one. And somewhere along the way, for a lot of us. And I say us because I am not above this. I have been in that fog too. The sanctuary stopped feeling like rest. It started feeling like absence. Like you were living your life, but someone had turned the saturation down. The colors were still there, technically, but they weren't vivid anymore. Joy came in smaller doses and left faster. Grief got swallowed before it could finish its sentence. Anger got tucked away somewhere so deep you'd almost forgotten how to access it. And love, even love, started to feel like something you were performing rather than feeling. This is what chronic numbing does over time. It doesn't just block the pain, it blocks everything. Because we don't have one switch for the hard feelings and a separate switch for the beautiful ones. We have one switch. And when we push it down far enough to stop the hurting, we also dim the wonder, the aliveness, the capacity to be moved. And that is its own kind of grief, isn't it? To realize that in protecting yourself from the pain, you may have also been protecting yourself from yourself. I want you to stay with that for a moment before we go further. Because everything we're going to explore together, the why, the how, the what comes next, it only matters if you're willing to acknowledge that something real is happening inside you. Not a flaw, not a failure, not evidence that you're broken or dramatic or too old to be this unresolved. Evidence that you are human, fully, completely, undeniably human. And that the quiet whispers you've been trying to outrun, they're not there to hurt you. They're there because they love you. And they've been waiting patiently for you to be ready to listen. So let's do something that might feel a little uncomfortable. Let's stop calling it stress and start calling it what it actually is. Because stress is a word we use when we don't want to admit how deep the water actually is. I've just been so stressed lately. Sounds manageable. It sounds like something a good night's sleep and a weekend away could fix. It lets us keep moving. It lets the people around us feel like they don't need to worry too much. But you and I both know there are things living underneath that word that haven't been named in a very long time. Maybe ever. So let's name them. Gently. Without judgment. The way you'd pull back a curtain in the morning, not ripping it open, just letting a little light in. Because the things we refuse to name have a particular kind of power over us. They grow in the dark. They get heavier in the silence. And the moment we finally say their name out loud, even just to ourselves, something shifts. Not everything, but something. Here's what I've come to understand after years of sitting with women in this particular chapter of life. The years between 55 and 75 are not a gentle plateau. They are, for many women, one of the most emotionally complex passages a person can walk through. And the culture doesn't prepare you for that. The culture hands you a kind of soft erasure around this age. You're supposed to be settling in, grateful, graceful, done with the hard part. But nobody told the pain that. Because this is the season when the losses start to stack. And I'm not just talking about the obvious ones, though those are real and they are heavy. I'm talking about the layered, accumulating grief of a life that is changing shape in ways you didn't fully consent to. Your body is different. Not just different, it's communicating in new ways, demanding attention, slowing down in places you didn't expect. And for many women, that carries a grief that isn't socially acceptable to speak about. We live in a world that tells women their physical form is their currency, and menopause, aging, the changing of the face, and the body you've lived in for more than half a century, that's a loss. It's allowed to be a loss, even while you're also at peace with it. Both things can be true. Your roles are shifting. The children who needed you so completely, who defined so much of your sense of purpose, they have lives now that don't center on you the way they once did. And you love that for them. Of course you do. But there's a hollow space where the needing used to be, a quiet room in the house of your identity where you keep walking in and finding nothing familiar. Mothers don't talk about this enough. The grief of no longer being essential in the way you once were. The strange, disorienting pride and sorrow of having done your job so well that you've made yourself less necessary. Your relationships have thinned. Friends have moved away, drifted apart, or been taken by illness or death. The social architecture of your 50s and 60s often looks very different from the rich, bustling network of your 30s and 40s. And loneliness at this age has a particular texture. It's not the lonely of being young and searching. It's the lonely of having known fullness and now navigating its absence. That is a different, quieter, more bewildering ache. And then there's the one we speak about least. The marriage or the relationship or the lack of one. The partner who is present but feels like a stranger. The partnership that has calcified into habit and logistics. The intimacy that evaporated somewhere between the kids and the careers and the years and the quiet. Mutual neglect that neither of you meant and both of you participated in. Or the absence of partnership altogether. the aloneness that comes after divorce or death, or simply a life that didn't arrange itself the way you imagined it would. These are not small things. These are the unspoken truths that live beneath the word stress. And here's where the numbing makes complete sense. Of course you pour the wine. Of course you stay up too late watching television that requires nothing from you. Of course you overschedule yourself, or overeat, or over-exercise, or disappear into your phone, or keep yourself perpetually busy with everyone else's needs. Of course you do, because sitting quietly with all of that, with the stacked, unnamed, socially inconvenient grief of a life in transition, is an enormous ask. The numbing isn't irrational. The numbing is logical. It's what a smart, capable, resourceful woman does when the pain feels too large and the world doesn't seem to have a proper place for her to put it down. But here is the thing about carried weight. And I mean the weight we carry emotionally, the kind that doesn't show up on any scale. When you carry something long enough, you stop noticing how heavy it is. Your body adjusts. Your posture changes. Your stride shortens. And you adapt so completely that you forget what it felt like to move freely. You forget that the weight isn't you, that it's something you've been holding, and that there is a difference. I want to ask you something, and I want you to really let yourself answer it. Not the answer you'd give to a friend, or a doctor, or your daughter. The real one. When was the last time you felt genuinely, fully, at peace in your own body, in your own life, without needing anything to take the edge off? Not happy, necessarily. Peace is different from happiness. Happiness comes and goes. Peace is a quieter thing. It's the feeling of being okay with where you are, even when where you are is hard. It's the ability to sit with your own thoughts without immediately needing to mute them. Can you remember that feeling? Can you recall when it last visited you? For some of you, it might have been years. For others, it may feel like something you've never quite had. A country you've heard about but never been to. And that, too, is something worth grieving. Not with shame, but with tenderness. Because longing for peace you've never had is one of the most quietly human experiences there is. Here's what the research tells us. And I say this not to overwhelm you with science, but because sometimes knowing the biology of what's happening makes us less afraid of it. When we experience chronic emotional pain, and we consistently suppress or avoid rather than process it, our nervous system doesn't actually file that pain away. It stores it. In the body. In the tightness across your shoulders. In the shallow breathing you don't notice until someone points it out. In the sleep that doesn't feel restorative no matter how many hours you get. In the low-grade exhaustion that isn't really about being tired, it's about being unresolved. The body keeps a meticulous record. It is a far more honest historian than the mind. And what the numbing does, over time, is not erase that record. It just keeps adding to the archive. The pain doesn't dissolve because you didn't look at it. It compounds. Which means the fear a lot of us have, that if we stop numbing, if we actually let ourselves feel it, we'll be destroyed by it. That fear, while completely understandable, is actually backwards. The feeling won't destroy you. It's the not feeling that's been quietly dismantling you, piece by piece, for years. You are more resilient than the feelings you've been avoiding. I promise you that. Not because resilience is a slogan, but because the evidence is already there. In the very fact that you've survived everything that got you to this moment. Every hard thing, every loss, every reinvention, every night you weren't sure how you'd get through, and then somehow you did. That woman, she can handle the feelings she's been outrunning. She just needs to be reminded that she doesn't have to run anymore. I want to tell you about a moment that a woman once described to me, and I've never forgotten it. She was 62, retired teacher. 3 grown kids, a husband of 38 years, a beautiful home by anyone's standards. And she said she was sitting in her kitchen one morning. A Tuesday, ordinary as anything. And she was on her 3rd cup of coffee. and she was about to open her phone to start the scrolling, and something made her stop. She said she put the phone face down on the table, and she just sat there with the quiet, with the light coming through the window, with the sound of the house. And she said within about 45 seconds, the feeling came. The thing she'd been keeping at bay with business and wine and other people's Netflix problems. It came like a wave, not violent, but present. This enormous, wordless sadness, and her first instinct was to grab the phone, to put something between herself and it. But she didn't. She sat there. She let it come. And she told me, and this is the part I want you to hold on to. She said, "It didn't kill me. It just cried for a while. And then it got quieter. And then I could breathe in a way I hadn't breathed in years." That is the turning point. Not a dramatic overhaul. Not a breakdown. Not a revelation that arrives with trumpets. It is a Tuesday morning. A face-down phone. 45 seconds of courage. We have been sold a story about healing that is almost entirely wrong. The story says healing is linear. It says there's a process with stages, and if you follow the stages correctly, you arrive at the other side fixed, resolved, done. The story also says that feeling your pain fully means being consumed by it. That opening the door to grief or loneliness or anger means those things will rush in and take over and you won't be able to function. Neither of those things is true. And carrying that false story around has kept a lot of women standing outside a door they were more than capable of walking through. Here is what actually tends to happen when we stop numbing and start allowing. The feelings come, yes, and they are real and they are sometimes intense, but they are also almost without exception survivable. More than survivable, they are moving, as in they move, they pass through. They don't set up permanent residence the way we feared they would. Grief, when you let it speak, doesn't go on forever. It speaks, and then it rests. And then it speaks again a little more softly. And then one day you realize it's shifted from something sharp to something you can carry with a kind of dignity. But it can only do that if you let it move. If you keep numbing it, keep stuffing it back down every time it tries to surface, it stays exactly where it is. Frozen, unprocessed, waiting. So what does it actually look like, practically, to stop numbing? Because I know what you might be thinking. You're thinking it sounds beautiful in theory and terrifying in practice. You're thinking, sure, but I have a life. I have responsibilities. I can't just fall apart on a Tuesday morning. And I hear that. I really do. But I want to gently challenge the premise, because I think what you're actually describing is not strength. It's a story about strength that's been protecting you so long it started to feel like truth. You don't have to fall apart to feel. That's the thing. In fact, falling apart is often what happens when you've been not feeling for too long and the pressure finally gets too great. The women who fall apart aren't the ones who make room for their emotions. They're the ones who didn't, until they couldn't hold it anymore. Making room looks quieter than that. It looks like this. It looks like taking 10 minutes in the morning, just 10, before the phone, before the news, before the demands of other people begin, and sitting with yourself. Not meditating, if that word makes you want to close the tab. Just sitting, breathing, letting whatever is there be there without immediately trying to solve it or suppress it. Witnessing yourself the way you'd witness a dear friend who was hurting. With patience, with softness, without an agenda. It looks like keeping a journal. Not a gratitude journal, though that has its place, but an honest journal. The kind where you write the things you wouldn't say out loud. The anger at your sister that you've been calling fine. The loneliness you've been disguising as introversion. The fear about your health, your future, your relevance, your mortality. The big, unspeakable things that live in the back of the house of your mind and only come out at 3 a.m. When you write them down, they lose some of their power over you. Not all of it, but some. Because the act of naming something is the beginning of having a relationship with it rather than being ruled by it. It looks like learning to distinguish between numbing and actual rest, because they feel similar on the surface. Both involve stillness or distraction or stepping away from the demands of life, but they are profoundly different in how they leave you. Rest replenishes. Numbing depletes, even when it looks like rest. The question to start asking yourself is not, am I stopping? But, how do I feel after? Do you feel restored, or do you feel vaguely hollow? That hollow feeling is important information. It's your inner life flagging that something wasn't nourishment. It was avoidance in comfortable clothing. And then there is something else. Something that I think is perhaps the most important piece of all, and the one most women in this season of life resist the most fiercely. Asking for help, letting someone in, allowing yourself to be witnessed. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being the capable one. From being the woman that everyone relies on, that no one worries about, that seems to have it together. And there is a particular kind of invisible suffering that lives inside that role. Because the capable woman has often learned, through years of experience, or childhood conditioning, or both, that her needs are less important. That asking is weakness. That burdening others is a sin she refuses to commit. But here is the unspoken truth beneath all of that noble self-sufficiency. You cannot heal in isolation. Human beings are not built for it. We are wired, literally neurologically wired, for connection, for being known, for having our pain witnessed by another person who doesn't flinch, doesn't minimize, doesn't immediately try to fix us, but simply stays. Simply says, I hear you. I see you. You're not alone in this. That experience of being truly heard does something to the nervous system that no amount of self-care practices can fully replicate. It regulates, it soothes. It reminds the most frightened part of you that you are not as alone as the silence has been suggesting. This doesn't have to mean therapy, though therapy can be extraordinary. It can mean one honest conversation with one trusted friend where you stop performing okayness and just tell the truth. It can mean finding a group of women who are walking similar terrain, and they exist, I promise you, in more places than you think. Women who are done with the performance. Women who are willing to say the real thing. Women in whose company the weight we carry can finally be set down for a little while. The turning point is not a transformation, not a reinvention, not a dramatic pivot that changes everything overnight. The turning point is a decision, made quietly in an ordinary moment, to stop running from yourself, to turn toward the feeling instead of away from it, to say, maybe for the first time, I'm here, I'm listening, tell me what you need, to become, at last, the sanctuary you've been searching for everywhere else. Part 4. The Reawakening. What waits for you on the other side? I want to tell you something that nobody puts on the brochure for this season of life. There is an aliveness available to you right now. Right now, at this exact age, in this exact body, with all of this exact history, that is deeper and more genuine than almost anything you felt in your 30s. I know that sounds impossible. I know the culture has spent considerable energy convincing you that aliveness is something that belongs to the young, that it peaks early and then we spend the rest of our years managing the decline, staying comfortable, being sensible, not wanting too much. But that's not what I've witnessed. That is not what happens to women who do the work of coming back to themselves. What I've seen, and what research on post-traumatic growth and emotional development actually supports, is that women who move through this passage consciously, who stop numbing and start feeling, and start telling the truth about their lives, often describe the years that follow as the most real years they've ever lived. Not the easiest, not without grief, but real in a way that younger years, for all their energy and possibility, often weren't. Because they are finally, at long last, present for them. That is what waits on the other side of the numbing. not happiness as a permanent condition, not a life emptied of difficulty, but presence. Genuine and habitable, yours to keep presence. Let me describe what the reawakening actually feels like, because I think we need a map for this territory, not a detailed itinerary. That's not how inner life works, but a few landmarks. So when you encounter them, you recognize them for what they are. The first thing that tends to happen when the numbing starts to lift is that the colors get louder. I mean that almost literally. Women describe noticing things they'd stopped noticing. The quality of light in the late afternoon, the smell of rain, the particular pleasure of a good cup of tea drunk slowly and without distraction. These aren't dramatic experiences. They're small. But they feel significant because they represent the return of something that had gone quiet inside you. The capacity to be moved by ordinary beauty. To be genuinely here for the small, gorgeous moments of being alive. This is not nothing. This is actually everything. Because a life is made of small moments, and when you've been moving through them behind glass, present in body, absent in spirit, you miss most of them. The reawakening is, in large part, the returning of your own attention to your own life. And that is a gift that doesn't require anything external. It doesn't require a new relationship or a different body or a bigger bank account or a better set of circumstances. It requires only that you show up fully for what is already here. The second landmark is what I call the return of your own voice. One of the quietest casualties of long-term numbing is the slow erosion of knowing what you actually think, what you actually want, what you actually feel about the people and choices and circumstances of your life. When we've spent years suppressing the uncomfortable feelings, we often accidentally suppress the whole conversation, and we find ourselves, if we're honest, making decisions from habit, or from obligation, or from a faded blueprint of who we used to be, rather than from any genuine current reckoning with who we are now and what we need now. The reawakening brings that voice back. Softly at first, just a quiet whisper. A small preference that surfaces unexpectedly. A realization that something you've been doing out of obligation no longer serves you. A flicker of desire for something creative or adventurous or simply more honest that you haven't let yourself feel in longer than you can remember. Listen to those whispers. They are not impractical. They are not selfish. They are not the indulgences of a woman who should know better at her age. They are the voice of a self that has been waiting with extraordinary patience for you to remember that she matters. Because here's what I need you to understand about this chapter of your life. And I say this with complete conviction, having seen it again and again. This is not the chapter of diminishment. This is the chapter of distillation. Everything that was performative, everything that was maintained for other people's comfort, everything that was fear dressed up as responsibility. This is the season when all of that can finally be set down. Not recklessly, not without care for the people you love, but consciously, deliberately, with the hard-won wisdom of a woman who has carried enough to know what's worth carrying and what isn't. You are not too old to want things. You are not too complicated to be loved. You are not too far gone to feel joy, real joy, not the performed kind, not the everything's fine kind, but the deep,